Greetings, and welcome back to the MCOC Encyclopedia. Today is day 5 of covering every champion in the game, and today we are looking at the science class. As a reminder, I'll be looking at a different class every day this week so that we cover the entire tier list ready for December's champions. So let's dive in. As before, I will be going through this list in columns starting at 10-10, then down to 10-1, 9-10, 9-1, and so on. This means, unfortunately, we have to start down in 10-2 with Cap World War II, a relatively outdated champion that doesn't really do much, so there isn't much to say. He does slightly more than those down in 10-1, but really not very much. Speaking of those in 10-1, we have OG Cap, Electro, and Rhino. They don't do anything even if you added them all together, so aren't really worth talking about. Electro is good on defense, but that's not included here. Up to 9-10, we have Quake, and she is stuck in the bottom left-hand corner here because she is capped as a 5-star. She is a relatively slow champion with a high skill floor and ceiling, but is so disgustingly overpowered that I will be very surprised if we ever see her as a 6-star. Her ability to just ignore most fight mechanics really allows her to cruise through a lot of content. But again, stuck as a 5-star. Down in 9-8, we have what most people would agree to be the best science champion at the moment, and that is Scorpion. He is an extremely versatile champion with multiple immunities, the only properly rupture immune champion in the game. He can hit very hard, and the fact that the primary source of his damage is red damage is very nice as well, as this allows him to get around nodes such as Rage or Safeguard. A very, very strong champion, made only stronger by synergies, but those aren't included here. Down in 9-7, we have Morbius, Photon, She-Hulk, and Thing. Morbius really likes that signature ability, not only for its cheese potential, but also to allow him to take bleed immune fights. Big burst, lots of debuffs, and that sig can be very cheesy. Photon hits very, very hard, and has some good debuffs to go with it. If you want a lot of examples of her, see Nagasi in his war videos, she's been absolutely crushing it there. She-Hulk has potentially infinite damage if you know what you're doing with her, but it's also not very difficult to get even very high damage from her. A very, very strong slow option as well, covering a lot of ground. Thing is an absolute tank, and that protection of his is so useful in so many different situations. They're at a special 3, don't care. Massive damage on you, don't care. They're about to hit you with something stupid, don't care. You can protection your way through a lot of things, and he is a very, very flexible champion with the rest of his kit. Down in 9-6, we have Red Hulk, an extremely reliable champion. He is double immune, or effectively so, and all he does is punch the opponent, but he does it very, very well, and he can cover a lot of ground with what he can do. Back up to 8-9, we have Void. A little bit slower, but once he gets going, he gets going. He is the best at what he does once he gets started. He really, really likes his signature ability, and you want to push it as far as possible so you can have your Fear of the Void up, as well as your debuffs at the same time. The constant damage over time is very, very nice, and his debuffs provide excellent utility. He might get moved to 9-8, but that's more of a movement rather than a promotion or a demotion. A very, very good champion. In 8-7, we have Cap Infinity War, Cassie Lang, Quicksilver, and Spider-Ham. Captain America Infinity War has a lot of utility, but some of it's built into his signature ability, which is very nice to have if you can get him to the high sig. Parry-heavy playstyle can be used to get around lots of things, and a big crit and a guaranteed stun on his special 2 is very nice. Cassie Lang is a power sting based champion, but can also have big yellow numbers from her special 2. Quite a high skill floor and skill ceiling with her, as she's got phasing and that sort of mechanic in her, but a very, very good champion. Quicksilver has massive burst potential once you get him built up, and despite the fact he might feel a little clunky when you first pick him up, you'll quickly get used to his extended combo. Spider-Ham is another power sting champion, but he also has evade and taunt built into his kit. He can hit very, very hard with those power stings, and the Ant-Man relic just takes him to a whole new level. At 8-6 we have Spider-Gwen. After a few special ones and she's ramped, she hits very hard, has excellent utility, and evade is always nice, and it won't trigger automatically when you try and block, so that's very helpful, simply just for playing the champion. At 8-5 we have Anti-Venom, Red Guardian, and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Anti-Venom has good utility from his debuffs, or you can have good damage by sacrificing them with your special 2. Because he's an either-or champion, I can't really push him any higher, but he does what he does well. Red Guardian has some very decent burst damage, but it's quite tricky to maintain as his debuffs are very short. I know there is a buff for him coming very soon, so we'll keep an eye out to see what that does for him. Miles has some pretty decent damage once you start completing his prompts, and miss on opponent specials, while isn't wholly reliable unless they're unblockable, can help get you out of a sticky situation. Really likes to be awakened so he can complete his prompts multiple times, and get some big furies from doing them. Down in 8-3, we have MCOC. For what is a relatively complicated kit, it doesn't really amount to anything, and combined with his awful block proficiency, he really isn't worth using on attack much. Up to 7-8, and we have OG Hulk and Titania. Hulk is arguably the king of just raw damage at the moment, as long as you can build his furies and get the physical vulnerabilities on your opponent. Go to special 3 with 15 furies, build the physical vulnerabilities, special 1, and that's most fights over. A very, very powerful champion. Titania is relatively similar, but has less damage for more utility. Her Haymaker is surprisingly powerful, as you can use it to tank an awful lot of things. Indestructible on command is very, very powerful. At 7-7, we have Immortal Hulk and Silk. Immortal Hulk has significant burst damage, and any champion that says dying is optional really can't be undervalued. He's also the only champion with immortality on his base kit. All other champions have it on their SIG ability. Silk has some significant burst damage and some great furies when you get her going, though she really likes to have a relic equipped. It looks like she was a champion that was designed for a relic in mind. At 7-6, we have Abomination Immortal, though he isn't immortal. A really great champion if you can poison the opponent and get those acid burns ticking, but even if you can't, you can still go to your special 3 and the damage is acceptable. A great Dr. Doom counter. At 7-5, we have Spider-Man OG. Some good damage and some good utility. Makes an all-round solid champion, though he doesn't do anything particularly special. At 7-4, we have Luke Cage. His damage is okay, but his indestructible is probably what sets him up slightly, as you can use this to tank a lot of things. At 7-8, we have Spot. He has excellent burst damage, and his untouchable is very, very nice for avoiding certain things. At 6-7, we have Mr. Fantastic and Sandman. Arguably very similar champions, both like to ramp up and apply debuffs to the opponent for a whole lot of utility. They focus on slightly different things, but are both great debuff champions. At 6-6, we have Ant-Man and Joe Fixit. Once Ant-Man gets going, he has effectively an indefinite poison that will just tick away on the opponent, but it's still not that great. My 6-star rank 4 with boosts and the recall tree still only ticks for about 3 and a bit K with class advantage. Yes, it will keep going and going, but it's still not that much for the amount of effort you have to go through to get it in the first place. Joe Fixit has some great bleeds and overall damage. A little bit light on the utility, but his regen is also very, very potent. At 6-5, we have Wasp. Some excellent special 3 damage once you get her ramped up, and the special 2 Petrify can also be very powerful. A surprisingly underrated champion, though a little bit squishy. At 6-4, we have Jessica Jones. Her damage is pretty good once you get her fully ramped, though the unreliability of her special 1 makes her, in my opinion, quite annoying to play. At 6-1, we have Abomination. He is fairly outdated and there isn't much to say here, and the only reason he's not in 10-1 is because if you can't poison the opponent, he effectively has no kit. He gains a meh fury occasionally. One of the worst champions in the game at the moment. At 5-7, we have Mr. Negative. A bit tricky to play, but has excellent degen from his special 2, and some surprising utility that isn't often talked about, including massive power reversal. Very powerful. At 5-4, we have Yellow Jacket. The damage is not particularly great, and it is very, very annoying to get him into his reactor overcharge phase, and even then the physical burst damage is still pretty mediocre. Decent Petrify and the Power Sting on his special 3 if you have a SIG 200 Yellow Jacket is fine, but nothing to write home about. At 4-9, we have Human Torch. In the right matchups against energy or mystic champions, he will absolutely shred. His incinerate damage will get very, very high, and his Nova Flames push that even further. At 4-4, we have Sentry. His ramp up is quite painful, and his Sig is one of the worst cash grabby horrible things in the game, and kind of just leaves a bitter taste in my mouth anytime I have to look at him. His damage, once you get him going, is surprisingly good, and though they aren't included here, with synergies he can hit pretty hard. But, unfortunately, I still think he needs a tune-up. At 3-8, we have Spider-Man 2099, and the Overseer. He is very good in power gain fights, and can do a lot by just hitting the opponent's block and redetonating his ruptures repeatedly. Really likes that signature ability. The Overseer has some great burst damage on his light attacks once you get him ramped up, and his immunities are very nice as well. At 3-6 we have Invisible Woman. If you can play her well, she has a lot of damage potential, and her shield makes her very, very tanky. The issue with her though is it's so easy to lose that damage. If she was just a little easier to play, I could see her being a very powerful science champ. Finally, at 2-4, we have Hulk Ragnarok, who I would potentially argue is one of the worst champions in the game. Allow me to explain why. Hulk Ragnarok has his Face Me mechanic, which triggers whenever he is taking direct damage. When this is not triggered, he hits like a noodle despite being a Hulk with massive hammers. His utility is also relatively light, and so he doesn't do much. Whilst Face Me is active, he gains a damage boost and regens a lot of the damage he takes. Unfortunately, that damage boost is still pretty mediocre. So, Hulk Ragnarok is bad even while he is dying, and if he is not dying, he's even worse. However, with a little bit of tuning, he could be a very potent but niche option. If he does get a tune-up, I could very much see him going to sort of 1-8, if he could really get a boost with and without Face Me active. So there we have it, my opinion on every science champion in the game. Tomorrow we'll be finishing up this list with skill, and then next week we'll push on with 6.2.5, and I'm sure I'll get round to doing Shuri at some point. If you want to shout at me about anything you've seen here, feel free to do so in the comments, or you can join my Discord server, linked in the description, where you can shout at me personally. Thank you, and I will see you next time.